and welcome to another edition of Heinous Hollywood, the show where I dig into the terrible turds of Tinseltown and feast upon the festering nuggets within. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at why Hollywood will forever be incapable of creating a genuinely great film adaptation of a video game. Like many people, the first ever video game movie adaptation that I can recall watching was Super Mario Bros. The movie which set the shite standard for years to come. To be fair, Super Mario Bros. Is actually a reasonably entertaining movie to watch when you're a kid. But seeming as today's children are entertained by the likes of High School Musical, that's hardly a glowing recommendation. However, even as a child watching Super Mario Bros., I was painfully aware of the fact that the movie had very little to do with the game upon which it was based. This is the first reason as to why there can never truly be a great video game adaptation. They just aren't faithful enough to the games themselves. And examples of movies which fall into this trap include Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, the movie which transforms the fantastical lands inhabited by characters with swords, conjuring magic spells, and doing battle with all manner of strange beasts, was replaced by a setting on Earth where characters with guns were attempting to survive an invasion by extraterrestrial ghosts. Although, it has to be said that it didn't deviate completely from the token-esque series of games, as the film featured the vocal talents of an actual real-life hobgoblin, Steve Buscemi. Street Fighter. Whilst the story from the game is hardly going to be replacing the works of Shakespeare in schools anytime soon, the movie made little attempt to follow the pre-established character arcs from the game. However, I guess that'll cut this movie a little bit of slack. I mean, after all, it did give the world a much-loved internet meme.
Of course!
Wing Commander. Despite the game's series creator Chris Roberts having co-written and directed this adaptation, it still largely ignored the story of the games and recast the original brilliant stars with irritating douchebags. For some bizarre reason, Chris Roberts also felt the need, hello Moosepig, to depict the series' main villains, the overgrown cats known as the Kilrathi, as suffering from a severe case of alopecia. What was that about? Doom, where the demons released from the bowels of hell itself are rewritten as simply being the result of genetic experiments conducted by a bunch of scientists. This is no doubt an attempt to not upset the Bible bashers in the world, as if they would have watched a movie that was called Doom in the first place. Ridiculous! Next up, we've got Resident Evil. Prior to Paul W.S. Anderson, not to be confused with genius filmmaker Paul Thomas Anderson, taking a piss all over the Alien franchise with the appalling Alien vs. Predator, he wrote and directed this adaptation of Capcom's classic game. The movie only has fleeting moments of similarities to the game. The most egregious change is turning an atmospheric horror title into a Matrix-style action flick. Hey, actually thinking about it, it's not that dissimilar to the game series, I guess. Let's face it, the only people who are going to have a modicum of interest in watching a video game adaptation are fans of the video game itself. Therefore, it's vital that the setting, characters and story all stay true to the source material. The only logical alternative is to follow the various elements of the game down to a T, and there are examples of movies which do just that. One example that follows the game much more closely is Resident Evil Degeneration. Whilst this animated CGI film tells an original story within the universe of Resident Evil, it is still faithful to the characters and general scenario of the games themselves. And that's the problem. The cutscenes in Resident Evil games worked not just because they were hilariously badly written and acted, but because they were viewed in short bursts, and you actually got to play a thoroughly entertaining survival horror game in between cinematics. Trust me when I say that watching an hour and a half of Resident Evil's unique style of shoddy cutscenes an amusing movie does not make. Okay, what's up next? Oh yes, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. The second attempt at a Final Fantasy flick tries to undo the harm done by the spirits within by making an extremely faithful follow-up to the most beloved of all the Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy VII. As a result, you have an extremely realistic-looking world with extremely realistic-looking characters who jump hundreds of feet up into the air. This may work during turn-based battles in video game form, but on film it just looks absurd and only serves to draw you out of the experience by making you realise that none of the heroes are in actual jeopardy. Not to mention making you question how these people are able to do a Freddie Mercury by defying the laws of gravity. Doom! This title did come up earlier in my previous list, but this movie actually closes with a recreation of the first-person perspective gameplay that the actual Doom games are renowned for. And yes, that is every bit as stupid as it sounds. So what is the solution to creating a good video game adaptation into a film? Well, I guess the solution is creating a great video adaptation that doesn't stick too closely to the games themselves, something that moves off in its own original direction. And there are actually films that do this. For example, one such film is Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. The movie which transformed the fantastical lands inhabited by characters armed with swords, conjuring magic spells and doing battle with all manner of strange beasts, was replaced by a setting on Earth where... Hold on. No, sorry. We've been here before. I guess that's the problem. Video games aren't a purely narrative-driven form of entertainment. They're their own thing. You can't adapt a video game into a movie without either pissing off the fans because of a lack of respect towards the source material, or boring the fans with a lack of interactive elements in order to break up the monotony and all-round absurdity of the premise itself. And, but, of course there is one other reason that a video game adaptation could never work in Hollywood. That reason has a name. I just can't remember it. What was the name of that reason? Of course! It was... Stay away, you destroyer of Hollywood!